Hi, I'm Mark Squibb. This is my presentation about supporting yourself when you have the flu. My first slide is going to be go ahead and show you the language I'm using. In this case, we're using a red line at the top, and this red line amounts to the arterial oxygen level. Basically, it's the amount of oxygen that's going out from your heart and lungs as you breathe, as your heart beats. The bottom line here is the leftover that comes back in the veins, and the difference between the top and the bottom is the amount of oxygen the body is able to use. And at the end of the day, more is better. So in your heart, when you're working normally, what happens is you have an exposure event, in this case, that ends up going for 2 to 5 days, and I call this the incubation period. This is after you've been exposed and the flu is incubating in your lungs. Virus is invading your cells, and it converts those cells into virus factories, which turn around and affect others. While you're in this incubation phase, you don't feel too bad. You've got a slight loss in oxygenation. You feel maybe a little bit off, but you're not really sick. But what's happening is the virus is spreading throughout your lungs, and you're contagious, so you might be giving the virus to other people. Okay, so then what happens is your body realizes, whoa, we've got a problem. Okay, and then your immune system will become active, and then your oxygen levels will decrease by about 50%. What's actually happening is your immune system is starting to attack your own lung cells, the ones that have been infected by the virus. Okay, and then when that happens, you'll create a lot of mucus, and then the mucus ends up creating a physical barrier to oxygen moving from the air in the air sacs in your lungs into your lungs. And then the other thing is that as your body attacks those lung cells, you actually end up with a loss of lung tissue. And so most of this loss ends up being a decrease in the arterial oxygen levels, but also because there's less oxygen. So it is typical to see a decrease of 50% of your body's ability to breathe. At the same time, you'll end up with a fever where your temperature goes up, your immune system will attack infected cells, you get debris as mucus. You also end up with pH imbalances. As your body loses the ability to breathe, your cells will end up absorbing sodium, and you end up with both alkali, but mostly alkali imbalances, and the loss of oxygenation creates fatigue. So, and this process of falling sick happens really quickly. You ever notice that, boom, you got sick, wow, man, you're crashing, and you just go down and you feel terrible for a long time. So, this loss of respiration basically hurts everything across your body. Not only do you feel tired, but your immune system is trying to do a big, powerful job, and loss of all that oxygen really makes it difficult for your immune system to do the job. So you end up with an immune suppression, so your immune system doesn't work as well as it needs to. You end up with systemic fatigue, you feel tired, you get these pH imbalances, which is where all the aches and pains come from. Surprisingly, those are usually alkali, where the sodium from the loss of oxygenation gets drawn into the cell, and you get hydroxide radicals that are outside. And the biggest deal is the immune system ends up stuck at 50% power, and that impedes your recovery. So what happens is you go down to this level, and then over 2 to 4 weeks, your body finally manages to clear the infection and build back the lung cells that were part of the illness. So it takes a long time to do this, which is why the flu takes so long to get over and why you're miserable for so long. So what we're going to do here is we're going to move into why it's important to short circuit this. So LiveO2 gives you some super powerful tools to speed this up. The first here is, if you can do LiveO2 during the incubation period, you're going to activate your immune system earlier. So the less time the flu has a chance to spread within your lungs, the less damage or the less attack it has to do. So that means if you lose less lung tissue, if you end up generating less mucus, you're going to be less sick for a shorter period of time. So you have less symptoms, etc. And then the other thing is that we found that with LiveO2 is that the oxygenation will actually compensate and is powerful enough to push through the mucus barrier and compensate for the loss of lung cells, so that in our experience, mine in particular, that if you do this, you'll end up with very mild symptoms for a shorter period of time. So And now the next point would be is you can actually do Live O2 during. Now what I discovered in my experience was that as soon as I went down, I went through the full crash, but then shortly after, as I was able to crawl out of bed and get on the system, I was able to restore my oxygenation so that I was only ill for basically a day. And so that by pushing through, I was able to get my oxygenation level up high, and that I went ahead and was able to repeat it, and I was able to maintain my oxygen level. So I was down Saturday, Sunday, but Monday I was back on my feet. So this was a during, and then the other thing is that I cycled through much more quickly than my family. My kids have been down for 2 to 4 weeks. My wife's been down for 3 weeks. So I'm obviously telling them pretty strongly that they need to do this. I think what happens there is that we restored oxygenation, and the absence of systemic hypoxia limited the pH imbalances, so I didn't have all the discomfort. I didn't end up in the acute fatigue. I maintained my immune system, so it was able to do the big job that it needed to do more quickly, and I just wasn't miserable. So anyway, that's that story. I believe that if I were to say the amount of time I actually had the flu and felt terrible was about 3 days, and I lost a half a day of work on Monday. I've had continuous coughing and stuff as my lungs have been, recovering, but I've just got better a whole lot faster than my family. So as we get back in, we start to look at, okay, what protocols make sense as you go through. All right, if you, like for example, this is what I usually do when I take a trip. I'm on a plane, assume I'm coming back exposed to something. So I'll come back and I'll do Immuno2 and probably whole body flush with as much of a workout as I can as soon as I get back in the office. Because what I want to do is in the early phase, while I'm incubating, I will very much try to get my immune system working so that I can avoid this crash. But in this last case, I missed my window. I don't know what happened, but then we get into Flu O2. Okay, the concept there of the flu, that's the breathing thing where, while you're down and super sick, you just take a deep breath of oxygen, hold it and pressurize your lungs to go ahead and activate or support the immune system in your lungs while you're sick. And then hyperthermia, which is what we call Immuno2, to go ahead and support your immune system in your body and to use that oxygen desaturation curve to go ahead and get the oxygen throughout your as high as possible throughout the body while you're too sick to get on an exercise. And when you get to the final point, which is usually 1 or 2 laps of this combination of Immuno2 Flu O2, will get your oxygen level high enough so that you can go back to do the combination of Immuno2 and whole body flush. So this is the protocol I did, and basically when I did this, I had basically 3 days sick and the rest of the days on my feet getting stuff done and recovering quite quickly. So, the point would be that this whole concept of the flu is really serious this year. We're calling it an epidemic. I found an article, you go to the doctor and they say, be sure to get the flu vaccine. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but, based on data that came out of Australia for the H3N2 virus, which is apparently the epidemic this year, there's numbers that vary between 10 and 30%. I tend to believe 10 because it mutates so quickly. So I also was able to find this little video that shows just how bad the flu is, and you're going to see pretty much the entire United States turn red because everybody is sick. In my grandson's class, there's 23 kids in the class, and only 12 are present today. This flu is serious. Protect yourself, and Live O2 is absolutely the best technique that you'll ever find. Have a great day.